Win big with new DRF All Access Past Performances. With one best-in-class product, you now get all 3 past performance formats. Go to DRF.com and use coupon code 1FREEPP for a free single card today.
Hi, everybody. Dan Illman, Ashley Mailloux, taking a look at the feature race at Santa Anita on Saturday. It's race number 9, and it's the $100,000 California Distaff. These are fillies and mares going down the hill at about 6.5 furlongs. Before we take a look at the entries, remember that DRFTV viewers have a chance to get 10% off all past performances. Shop now by accessing the QR code on your screen and use the coupon code DRFTV10. Let's take a look at the field now for the California Distaff Handicap. Very competitive field of fillies and mares. 11 entered. The 12 is scratched. Sassy Nature, the 9, has a lot of early speed, and she's back in with fillies and mares after setting the pace in the Green Flash.
But can't you go 6.5 on the downhill? That's the big question. Those other efforts, 5 at Del Mar, and you know, you have some talented horses in here, such as Grand Slam Smile, who in my opinion does very little wrong, but this is a different ball game. Never been on the downhill, only been on the turf once at a mile. Choose Mosa. Distance, all right, but it's the turf question. So a little bit of an interesting event. I actually thought from a wagering perspective, a good race to get involved in.
Well, let's throw up the Timeform US Pace Projector. We know Sassy Nature is speed. You mentioned now she's going to stretch out from 5 to 6.5. So it's all about if the jock can maybe back down the fractions just a little bit. Grand Slam Smile is a very tactical horse, and breaking from the outside might sit a good trip, stalking the pace, as will Diamond Bar Gal. I like Scam's tactical speed. It doesn't seem to matter whether she goes 2 turns or sprints. She's usually in the thick of things when they turn for home.
Yeah, and maybe on paper, Dan, she's probably the horse to beat from a class perspective, and just those trips that you've talked about. She can be close enough to it. She could be on the lead. She's versatile, anywhere from 5/8 to a mile. She's been very effective, and again, figures to get a really good trip. And we don't see necessarily a fast pace here at 6.5 on the downhill, though. I mean, they're going to go very quick. We'll just see how it unfolds if Sassy Nature is able to shake loose early.
The horse with the fastest Timeform US late pace rating is the 4 Rose Maddox, getting back to 6.5. She kicked him down going down the hill in the Sunshine Millions filly and mare turf earlier this year. Let's start things off with Back on Track, who's getting back to the turf after just being overmatched last time out in the Torrey Pines against a very good one in Hope Road. And she was also in tough 2 starts back against Statebreds in the Fleet Treat. Her 1 turf sprint recently, 4 back, resulted in an okay performance, but this is a much tougher field.
Yeah, equal to her career best buyer there, but probably not good enough to win this. That's a 68. My concern would also be horses like Prancing Through Paris, Grand Slam Smile have continuously gotten the better of her in most of their meetings, or all of their meetings to this point, and she's just been too far back. And I think the problem with 6.5 for her on the downhill and having the inside, I don't think she has a ton of early foot. She's coming out of some very speedy races, but I don't think you necessarily want to be pinned on the inside if you're not going.
Another horse that doesn't appear to have a lot of early speed is the number 2 Rebelation. She just hasn't broken well in her last 2 starts, and that puts her at the mercy of Trip Luck, which what happened last time out when she was entered for the $50,000 claiming option. It looked like she had a little bit of run. She just didn't have anywhere to go. She is going to need some pace. She's going to need a trip, and she might need to take a step forward against this tougher group.
I would say the connections, you know, you look at her, they claimed her. She had a very long layoff going back from 2022 to 2024. And I think she's run some very good races. I don't know if she's necessarily stakes caliber, especially at this point in her career. But if the pace is hot, I would expect her to be rolling light. It's just, is the pace going to come back to her? I just think the talent kind of that's going to be towards the front here is just going to be better than her in the end.
Prancing Through Paris is an interesting horse to consider at a price. She's 12-1 on the morning line. She's sprinted twice in her career on turf. She's won both of those races, including her last start against Calbreds way back in February. Now, they've run her on dirt since, and why not? She's performed well on the surface, but I like that they gave her time after the Fleet Treat. I like that they're getting her back on turf, and I think she can kick at a price. She has some upside.
I don't mind the time off. I thought she had a little bit of a troubled trip most recently, and she was jumping up right after her 3 prior efforts. She got back into the stakes level, was changing from the long stretch at Los Al to Del Mar and stretching out. A lot was thrown her way, and she finished mid-pack. I don't mind her regrouping on the turf. Another one, though, I mean, her career best by far was the race at Los Al that towers over her other numbers. Would need to take a step in the right direction. But Turf sprints, this is Peter Urton's sort of ball game. He has really strong numbers from the outfit, and maybe he's onto something here with just cutting her back and giving her a shot on the downhill.
Rose Maddox, the number 4, won this race last year. She usually always shows up against Calbreds, and she's returning to turf off a dirt race at Los Alamitos. Let's watch her turf start 2 starts back. It's a mile heat in the Solana Beach, and she runs on really well to be second. You see her saving ground now, and she's going to try to alter course to the outside, and maybe that cost her a little bit of ground, having to move sideways when everyone else was moving forwards. That being said, I like her cutting back to 6.5. She's good at a mile. I think she's better sprinting.
She reminds me of the older Grand Slam Smile in the sense that she's versatile, can run on anything, a variety of distances. And I don't necessarily prefer her on the dirt, though. I think synthetic and turf has been the better fit for her. You look at her turf races, she's been very competitive, has, faced a lot of these likes before, but you talked about last year. She was able to beat some of these runners. Even earlier this year, she was able to beat Stay and Scam and did it pretty impressively. And I just think it comes down to trip with her. And I think it's a promising sign to see Juan Hernandez booked. Not typically go-to rider. She changes riders all the time, probably because in some of these spots, there's just mares or fillies that figured to be a little bit better. But I can't knock her out in here. I think she's a major player in the exotics, at least.
The 5 Diamond Bar gal might be rounding into her best form. This is her 3rd start off of a lengthy layoff. She's very lightly raced with only 4 starts under her girth, and she's never taken a backward step on the Beyer scale. She was a pretty good-looking pace pressing winner last time out, but she's also effective from off the pace, and I think that tactical speed will come in handy here.
Absolutely. And she's going to have to stretch out in distance. She's only gone the traditional 5 ace, now has to go to 6.5. But just looking at sort of that trip that you're talking about, Dan, where she's forward, she doesn't need the lead, but she's just off of it a couple of lengths at most. I think that puts her in a really good spot here. And, in terms of what she's going to face in terms of stakes caliber for the first time in her career, I think this is a good spot to give her a shot. It's not too difficult of waters, but she's still going to get tested.
Like the 3 prancing through Paris, the 6 Andiamo Ragazza is a perfect 2-for-2 sprinting on the turf. And I thought she ran well 2 starts back, going 5/8 at Del Mar. It's not like that pace was blazing. They went 23 seconds for the opening quarter. She was last, and she still was able to kick them down. They tried 2 turns last time out. It's not like she had the cleanest trip that day. This is another sleeper returning to what could be her best distance.
Yeah, and she might just be more of a one-turn horse at this point in her career. She's only 3 years old, and I don't even want to say that she can't go 2 turns, though. You talked about the trouble that she had last time out and it didn't work. Maybe they'll try it again later. But I think in terms of regrouping, they've gone the 5/8, they've gone a mile and a 16th. This is sort of the sweet spot in the middle to give her a little bit more distance because, frankly, her win at Del Mar, I think she needed more ground. She was able to get up, barely got up when it was all said and done, but a horse that probably will benefit from the added ground.
Stay and Scam, the number 7, just looks like a downhill turf course specialist. She's won her last 2 on the course, including a really good-looking win in the Irish O'Brien, where she got right up close to the pace, and she scored despite the jock losing the whip in the stretch. They ran her 5/8 in the Daisy Cutter 2 starts back. She ran okay. They ran her a mile last time out in the Solana Beach. She loomed and flattened. This distance just seems to hit her right between the eyes.
Absolutely. And I think kind of looking at the strategy with her earlier this year, they got her comfortable around 1 turn. That was kind of the big test for her. Can she go 1 turn? And she showed that she can be competitive. They gave her some time off. So I think the Daisy Cutter was just that return to the races. Let's go around, go 5/8, get her back. And maybe because they were disappointed with the mile effort after that, thinking that she was going to take a step forward, they're looking at where to regroup. And 6.5 on the downhill has been very good to her. So I think this is sort of a case of going back to the basics, getting her back on track. And her performances, she can be very tactical and quick from the gate, and she still has something left in reserve. So on paper, I think she is the filly to beat for sure.
She's also the number 8 is a very underrated filly. She's earned a couple of graded stakes placings on the dirt. And while she hasn't won on the turf, she's performed well on the surface. She just shows up each and every time. Now, she needs pace and she needs a trip. And you know what you're going to get from her. She's not going to change leads in the stretch. But against this caliber of competition at this price, she certainly fits.
She does. And I would typically shy away from an 0-for-6 horse on the turf. I just think continuously she gets tested. She's been against really nice horses. Sweet Azteca. Go down the page. Some of these horses as well. Daddy's Ruby. Very curious to see her back on the grass. Wonder what the trip will be. When Kyle Frey was aboard her in those consecutive races on the downhill, she was usually a handful of lengths, had a couple of targets in front of her and tried to make a late move. And it was a mixed bag of apples in terms of results, but still, I think she's a curious type and very curious to see how she'll be played, knowing that she was second to Sweet Azteca last time out, who bounced in her next effort. But she's 10-1 on the morning line. I have to think she's going to take a little bit more respect than that.
Sassy Nature looks like the speed, and why not? She went gate to wire at Del Mar 2 starts back, where she just showed that field her heels. She was too quick for them. She was clear in the blink of an eye. They ran her against tough boys. Matorius looks like the main contender to Cogburn in the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint right now. Showed speed that day and tired. But you mentioned it. Can she go 6.5? 5.5 has been testing for her thus far in her career. It's all about if she gets a breather.
She gets a breather, and if she's able to handle the downhill. And when you go to the Performance 2 back, when she was able to win at Del Mar against the boys, I mean, it's pretty dominant. I know she's getting out a little bit here. She's getting a little tired. I still think it's a good effort for her. A career best, a 96 buyer would put her in the mix. And just from a pace perspective alone, you have to know if she's going. Can she stay? That's the question. I think at least a player again in the exotics. She's very, very quick.
Grand Slam Smile, the number 10, a very talented 3-year-old filly. She's already won 5 times. She's only raced once on the turf. It's sure worked out going a mile in the Cal Cup Oaks. Another versatile tactical type that was probably overmatched against Hope Road in the Open Torrey Pines. I'm not worried about her on turf. And I think in her third start off of a short layoff, she's another filly that can work out her own trip. You mentioned this is a great betting race. 10-1 on Grand Slam Smile. You rarely get that against Calbreds.
Absolutely. And I'm biased. I love this filly. I think she's so fun. I like the horses, Dan, that can run on anything, any distance, and they still give their effort. And for a 3-year-old filly to be doing that at this point in her career, I think says just a lot about her maturity and her ability. The Torrey Pine, I don't think she embarrassed herself knowing who finished in front of her and the hype that came out of that race. And she was stretching back out. It was just her second start since late May. She's been kind of lightly handled this year once again with just the 4 starts. She had 5 last year as a 2-year-old. And the one thing I found a little interesting and curious about is her workout. She's always been a good workout sort of course in the morning with timely works, but she's really stepped it up in her last 2. And you just wonder if they've just been trying to put a little bit more speed to her in the mornings to gear her for the turf sprint.
Big Summer is really consistent. 16 of 18 on the board. She's won going down the hill in the past and is another making her third start of the form cycle. She was third last time out in a second level allowance race going the 5 ace, but I think she's built up fitness off of this performance. This horse on the lead just blitzed him. Big Summer is going to get to the outside and run on late for third. She's another one. She's very, very consistent. She's likely going to be a price here. I think she could drift a bit off the 5-1.
And you look at her before she went to the shelf. She went to the shelf for almost a year. And then they brought her back. Her first 2 starts, I think she just needed fitness. I think she really lacked it. And then they gave her a little bit more time off in her last 2. I think she's looked very good at Del Mar. And just looking at her win back and then that effort we just saw where she was a well-meant third. She did fail as the favorite. To me, at 6.5 might be what she needs at this point. Again, I think for a couple horses in here, we've said that this distance is perfect. I just think maybe for a return to the races, the 5 ace worked. Now she needs to go a little bit further. And she has a ton of upside in here as well.
We'll get a good show in the California Distaff. These are some hard-knocking fillies and mares. Let's take a look at our top selections. We both like Stay and Scam cutting back to 6.5. I just think the downhill turf is what she wants. You like the 11 a little bit as well. 7, 11, 8, 9. We've got the same super, slightly different order.
Yeah, similar thought process with both of these fillies and mares in terms of, I think 6.5 is the perfect distance for them. I think the Stay and Scam edge is maybe just the level of competition she's faced over the last 12 months. I think it's been pretty salty and she's held her own. And in the case of Big Summer, I think she just has upside. If the pace is quick enough on the downhill, she should be rolling late and probably will be a little bit of a fair difference in price between these 2 runners come post time.
Yeah, I like Stay and Scam as well. I am curious to see how far Sassy Nature wants to go. She's likely going to be in front when they cross the dirt patch going down the hill. 7, 11, 8, 9 for Ashley. 7, 9, 11, 8 for me. It's the California Distaff, the feature at Santa Anita on Saturday. Good luck.
Hey, buddy. Let me tell you something. If you really enjoyed this great content, just click the like and subscribe button right here. And if you enjoy the race of the day, stakes, previews, and lots more starring me, please click right here. You're not gonna regret it.